Hello friends, let's get started here. As usual, the video is recorded, so if people are coming in late, you can always catch up, or if you can't watch it now but you want to watch this other times, you will be able to see this because it is recorded. Thus, we can get started. So I will start with some presentations just to get things started here. Welcome to BioML again, the BioML show. My name is Manuel. I'm Monetizing, your host, and today we are going to talk about creating a REST API using Flask and using DigitalOcean. So it's kind of the first time I'm doing something on DigitalOcean. I've started using it recently. But before I go into DigitalOcean, let me just say a few words about the importance of REST APIs and Flask. So if you're looking to create a side business, a side hustle, you're interested in a way of becoming a data provider, or even provide some type of information. It can be as complicated as stock market predictions to as simple as giving the time. REST APIs are the way to go. They're super simple to use, and they're actually pretty nifty. Somebody thought about, okay, how can we create a function and be able to make that function be able to be called from anywhere around the world? What's the biggest network we can use? Well, they piggybacked, of course, the internet network, and simply created a function where you can ask and post data, get and posts, update, writes, reads, all that using the internet network through function calls. So there's no display, there's no UI, there's no HTML. It's really just you ask for something and you get a value back. It can be very complex. You can say I want something between two dates, for example, and you'll get something back. If it's programmed that way, you'll get that back. So really cool. It's also used extremely a lot more and more in machine learning. They have trained models in the cloud. When you ask for a prediction, you give an observation, and it'll return a probability or return something. So it's used all over the place. The App Engine has them, Azure has them, where they're built in. You simply the model is trained in the cloud, can be trained distributed, and then through a REST API you can communicate with that model and get your prediction. So really cool. Front page, BioML, please sign up for my newsletter right there in the middle of the page. Give the video some thumbs ups, it's always appreciated. And let's get started here. So the code is, one more thing. The code is right here. If you scroll down, there is the kind of the thumbnail for the video, what we're talking about right now, and here is the code. So there you'll be able to see more or less what we're following. It's not exactly the same, but once I have the video finished and updated, there'll be the updated code. So it's there. Let's get started. What we're going to do is very simple. We're going to create a quote dispensing REST API function call. So super simple. Basically, it's going to be, you call the REST API, and it's randomly going to return one of these, it looks like 6 quotes from The Little Prince by Antoine de Saint-Exupéry, a children writer, very popular, and he has these cute quotes. So we're going to create a service that's going to return a random quote every time. So here I'm loading them in memory. Briefly to show you how it works, we're going to create a, let me move my face here actually. I'm going to move it completely. We're going to, we load these quotes into a data frame calling, pandas.read_CSV. We have no headers, and we just pass it the name quotes. And then we're gonna ask we're gonna say, from the quote feature, the series, we're gonna say .sample. And it's going to basically return a sample. One of these 6 quotes is going to be returned. So if I run it a bunch of times, as you see, you get a different quote. So that's basically the engine, the motor that we're going to put into DigitalOcean using Flask and Python for our REST API. So super simple. It basically distributes random quotes that we have preloaded in DigitalOcean. So let's talk briefly about DigitalOcean. I am as you know, I use Python Anywhere all the time. I love the simplicity, but I've also used the big providers. I've done GCP using App Engine on Google Cloud. I've done Beanstalk on Azure. On Amazon, and I've done Azure as well. The easiest by far is Python Anywhere, just because it loads everything for you. It builds Flask for you, and you can edit directly in the dashboard. But what's cool, there is a way of doing that in DigitalOcean. That's what I'm going to show today. If you go to the link here, there's it's called try.digitalocean.com/performance. Here you will get oh, here somebody said hi. Hey Callie. Hi Callie. Thanks for saying hi. Anybody else who's joining, please, say hi. It's good to know who's here. And if you have questions, please post them. I'll try to check on a regular basis. They give $50 credit, and you can try it for free. So this is really cool if you're interested in DigitalOcean. What I like about DigitalOcean, I love Python Anywhere. Don't get me wrong, but one thing that I had problems with on Python Anywhere was using headless Chrome for Selenium work. This worked perfectly. So it's a little bit more setup, and I'll briefly show you what that means. But overall, it's a good complement. So now I use both. I have Python Anywhere. This is basically running on Python Anywhere, but I do some backend processes using DigitalOcean. So once you, I'll walk you through a few screens on setting up DigitalOcean, because I don't want to set it up because this will not be a 20-minute video. It would be a 2-hour video. But once you sign up, right, you get an account. It's free. You have $50 credit. You will, they'll confirm. You'll get a confirmation email, and you'll send it back, and then you'll be able to set up your slice, and you will be able. Here it is. And you'll then be able to choose your kind of what you're going to be using the platform. I am using it for Python, so I put Python. There's no Flask, unfortunately. There's Django, but there's no Flask. It's too bad. Maybe they'll put it so they could set up Flask for us off the bat. Then you'll get this dashboard. And here you go there's droplets. So create a droplet, and a droplet is basically your instance. It's a very simple instance in the cloud. You create a droplet and you name it. Of course, it's not free, but you're using your credits. And I've been using droplets, the base droplets, now for a few months, and it never cost me more than $4 a month. So super cheap. Then you need to choose what kind of image you want on your instance. I'm going with Ubuntu and the cheapest instance, which is 1 gigabyte in memory and 25 gigabyte SSD at about $5 a month. And it's pretty accurate. I haven't gone beyond that price. You have to scroll because it'll default to something a lot more expensive. Just beware. Find the cheapest option. And then you just say, create your droplet. This is what mine looks like. Here it is, and you have your IP address. So mine is set up here, and I'll briefly walk you through how you set it up, but we can't set it up because it takes a little bit of time. That's the disadvantage. The difference really with Python Anywhere is that it basically builds us the instance for you with everything you need. Here we have to build things ourselves. So the way you do this, there's a little console button. Actually, let me remove this because it's annoying. Here you have a console button, and when you click on it, it will open this console, right? This looks like your normal terminal window, and that's actually a terminal window inside my console. So let me get out of there because we're going to come back here in a second. Wrong button. Here. So, and this basically, once you have the instance finished and built, you can hit the console button and you can then start doing anything you want. So there's unfortunately a few things that you need to do to get DigitalOcean. You need to do the typical apt-get updates, upgrade. You got to install Python 3 pip, Python 3 dev, Python 3 setup tools, build essentials. These things, they'll take you 5 minutes, so you have to kind of go through this. Then you change drive, you create a Flask app directory. And in there, we're going to create our virtual environment, and then we'll fire off a Python 3.6 virtual environment. And from there on, we're working in a virtual environment all the time. It's just a lot easier to work with. Once you're in your virtual environment, you need to pip install a whole bunch of things. Wheel, Flask, UWSGI, Pandas, and Flask RESTful. So all this stuff, right, is typical for Flask. This stuff is typical for Flask. Pandas, we're using Pandas to get the random quotes, and Flask RESTful is what's gonna set up the REST API stuff for us without us having to worry about it. It's gonna do it for us like magic, so we don't have to do too much work. So it's really cool. So the way you work, of course, if you're not familiar with Unix or Linux, you have to use Vi. Vi is the way you communicate. Is basically a mini word processor, or like a notepad. Let's call it what it really is, a notepad editor inside your terminal window. And from there, you can do all sorts of things. So let's build a very simple Flask app on DigitalOcean. Let's do that. I'm going to do this live with you. So let me bring it up. Here it is. So I'm right, as you can see, I'm in my virtual environment. Everything in the code in the notebook is there. Well, I think it's pretty well explained. It's pretty explanatory. There's not that many steps, and it will get you in your virtual environment. And when you want to create a new file, so I'm going to go vi. I'm going to call this one Flask underscore test.py, and that's going to create a brand new file. It's an empty file called Flask underscore test.py. You hit the I key. The I key puts you in insert mode. It's very important to have insert mode. And then you can cut and paste the code if you want, or you can type it, however, whichever you prefer. Let's see. Make sure that I'm pasting it here. Oh, I need to scroll up. Okay, so I pasted it a bunch of times. So I'm hoping you can see everything. So I'm in insert mode. So let me just remove my line, and I'm going to paste it. So you can't really paste as a group, unfortunately. You have to paste line by line, or at least, that's the only way I figure out how to do it. But you can also type things manually, right? It's pretty simple. So for those who are not familiar with Flask, you import Flask. You create an instance of Flask where you just simply say app equals Flask and name is generic, but app becomes your instance of Flask. The decorator at app.root says anything that comes to the root of this is from in our internet server, we want it to be handled by this function index, def index. So you can call anything you want, but anytime you get a call from your root of your of your URL, it's going to be handled by this function. And here we're simply going to say return hello from YouTube, and it's very, very hard to see. So the color scheme is pretty bad. So I am going to just hit OK. And this is definitely, maybe we want to change that dark purple. It's hard to see. And then we're going to go if name equals main, run. We're going to run the app. We're going to run our Flask app. So this is kind of a way of running it locally, even though we're going to be really serving it on the internet. There is a better way of doing this. This is not a robust, this is not a production. This is a testing way of doing things, but it's fine for our needs in this video. So here, in theory, it should work. So when you're done, you hit the escape key. Let me scroll down so we see things. Escape key, write W, quit Q, write Q. If you don't like what you just did, you would do a Q, quit, exclamation point, and that would erase everything you did. But we don't want to do that, right? We want to keep what we did. So it's write and quit. And it'll bring me back to your prompt in our virtual environment. And if I go ls, yep, we see now we have Flask underscore test.py. And it's super simple to run. You go Python 3, Flask underscore test.py. And it is running. Okay, it runs. So this is the magic of being here in a slice. Normally, you do this on your local machine. You open a local browser. Here, it gives you this IP address that's not going to work. So you need to go back to your main machine, to your main slice, your dashboard on DigitalOcean. Copy your slice's IP address. Open a new tab, paste it in, and go :5000. Basically, do the same thing as it was showing, and here it is. Hello from YT, hello from YouTube, right? So now we are live, right? This is live on the web. You could enter these numbers on your end, and you would see the exact same thing. Let me jump back to this window. As you can see, it says, :5000/, and it's running, right? We now have our instance running in the cloud of a very basic, Flask application. So once we're done, you hit Control-C. To get out of this there. And right, we're now out, right? So I'm gonna make sure that we're here. It's a little bit of a delay here. Let me do that again. There we go. So we did a very basic version. Now let's do a real version using a Flask, a REST API in Flask. So let's go back to the code. So you do need to turn the permissions here, and then you can run your application as a test. This is one thing I've already done before. It will not run without it, so you only need to do that once. And then whatever IP address you have, :5000, that'll get you running. So now we want to do something a little bit more complicated, right? Let me scroll here. We want to do the REST API, so for here, we're gonna have to do a little bit more coding. We're gonna be using we're gonna be importing Flask. We're gonna do the request object. We're also gonna be importing the Flask underscore from the Flask underscore RESTful, get the resource and the API. And this is gonna basically create the scaffolding for us, without us doing all the work. People have done this manually. We're not going to do it manually. We're going to do everything automatically. So again, you instantiate your Flask. Here you have to instantiate the API as well for your RESTful. And this is how a REST API works. You create a class. In this class, we're calling it Hello World, and you have a self. And we're going to return, whenever it's called, we return hello world. If you had an update, a write, a read, you would have more functions down. So we're going to keep them simple. We're going to keep it and just do this. But as you see, it's going to return a key pair, right? This is the whole idea behind a RESTful API, is you call for something and it could return multiple values, multiple key pairs, and then you can read that on your end. Your application would, or Postman, or however you're going to be reading it. And I think next week we'll look at Postman. Here we're just going to kind of print it out in the web. And then, call the API.add. You want to add this as part of your API call, hello world in our case, and we run it. Okay, so let's create. I'm going to go back to our test. I'm going to update it to this code. So let me jump back to our DigitalOcean slice, and we already have, right? We have Flask.test API. So I'm simply going to go vi. A file that already exists, so it's not going to create a new one, but instead it's going to open our existing one, and you can scroll up and you'll see our code. So I'm going to click the I key, right? Because you want to be in insert mode. If you see you have insert, that means you're in insert mode. That's good. Otherwise, it won't let you insert things. And let me just kind of cut and paste the our missing files. So Flask, we need the request object. So let me just add a request here. Then we're going to be adding all the Flask RESTful libraries. We're just going to cut and paste the whole thing, save time. We instantiate our Flask app, which we've done, and now we also need to instantiate the API. There it is. And now we need to add the class. So before we're going to be doing, let's add the class here. So class hello world, def our function call def get self, and what we're returning here, we're going to be returning a key pair. Remember, it's always a key pair. There we go. And we don't need this anymore, so I'm going to remove these lines. This is for a regular Flask call where you're actually showing a web page, or in this case we're just returning a string, but similar in concept, except now here we're going through the actual scaffolding of the REST API, and you need to add that API because we declared it, but we need to add it now to our API object, and we should be good to go. So with this, I'm gonna hit the escape key, colon, as usual, right? We have to do write and quit. So we save our changes. There, we're good. And same deal as before. I'm going to go Python 3, Flask. There we go. Hit return. And it worked good. So now I can jump back to our old page. Let me just switch so you can see it. There we go. And okay, so this is what we had before, right? Hello from YT. If I hit return, yeah, it works. Now we have, even though it's not a huge difference, right? But just because it's a stupid REST call that we're doing, right? Just simply returning this hard-coded pair, but viralML has a value hello world, right? That's basically all it's doing. So it's defaulting to one function call, which is our hello world function call, which returns this pair. So very simple, nothing really interesting. So now, one more thing. I don't want this video to be too long as usual, and I do have a problem of my videos run a little too long. 20 minutes would be ideal, and I never can do that. So now we want to move to our actual quote generating code. So let's go over the code. I already have this one typed in, so I'm just going to run what I have, but let's go to the code first. So the only difference here is we're on top of it, we're importing pandas, which we did pip install pandas in a virtual environment, so we're good. Everything else is the same, except we are loading in memory quotes underscore df our quote library. So if you want to do this experiment, you will have to, let me switch here quickly. You will have to, let's get out of here. You will have to upload, as you can see here, quotes.csv, right? It's there. So I actually did a vi quote.csv, it opened vi, and I did line by line, all 6, and then I saved it. And that's how I got my file up there. So next week we'll be doing a much better way where you can SSH from your local machine. But in this one, I wanted to keep it short and at least have the basis covered so that next week when we go in, we'll be able to have a jump start. But let's go back to our code. So I do have quotes.csv in my virtual environment instance. We're good. Exactly the same thing as we did earlier. This has changed a little bit. So it's still a default return, default get whenever you're calling the basic, the only API call you have. You're going to get the get quote. It's going to do a global call to our quotes.df. So this is interesting, and it's worth talking about it for a minute. We're doing this global call. It means that whenever you're instantiating your web server, your Flask web server in the cloud, this gets loaded in memory only once. You could have it put it somewhere else. You could. There are different ways of doing it, but we don't want to load up in memory this quote.csv every time somebody calls, right? So that's why we're doing it as a global. So now this is already in memory. We have our 6 little prints quotes loaded in memory, and that's how we call global quotes.df. And here we can then pull, just like we did on the Jupyter Notebook, pull a random quote, right, sample, and we return it, a quote, and this new quote variable, right? Before it was hard-coded, now we're returning whatever, we don't know what it is, right? One of our sample sets. And we load everything in, we basically, this is a new API call, so we load it in our API to add underscore resource, and we're good to go. Okay, so let me go back to our instance here. And let's run this. So let's see, where are we? So this is, in my case, it's Flask app.py. So Python 3. You probably don't need to put the 3, because I think there's only one version and it's 3. Flask app.py. Let's make sure it works. It takes a little bit more time to start up because it's loading that CSV. And if you had a very large data set in there, it would take even longer. And let's see. Okay, let me go back here. Go back, right? Same IP address, same extension, same port. Now I'm going to hit the return key. And look at that. Quote, all grown-ups were once children, but only a few of them remember it. Let me run it again. A new one. Oh, this is the same one. Let's run it again. You become responsible for forever for what you've tamed, right? So it's interesting. We don't have the semicolon here. So I mean the quote. I wonder if that's a problem in the bug or not, but that's no big deal. Run it again. Let's see if we can get a third one. What makes the desert beautiful, said the little prince, is that somewhere it hides a well. Okay, so you see how it works, right? Very simple, very straightforward. This is basically a REST API. So the beauty of a REST API is you can then have this call directly into your Flask code. So you can call other services from your Flask code and get values. So this is especially, you can do something more intelligent, like for example, get the stock quote by passing it MSFT, Google, whatever, right? And it would return a specific value. So it can do some very intelligent, dynamic passing back and forth of values super fast with his REST APIs. And if you're thinking about, starting your own side hustle and you have a great source of data that you want to share to the world, something you think is interesting, and it's a form of a data, right? Some piece of information, a time, a stock prediction, whatever, right? REST APIs are pretty cool. It's definitely a great way of, generating a function call all over the world, piggybacking on the internet. So, as usual, I like to plug my material here at the end of the show. This series here. I was looking backwards, so I need to change my face here. This book here, MVP Lightstack Field Guide, is going to be the whole series of these videos. For example, if you go to the environmental.com, the front page, channels, and you go to web applications, this here, you'll see a lot of the themes, at least, that are going to make it in this book. I'm still kind of writing it. I'm hoping to get it out by the end of October, or let's say worst case scenario, mid-November. But it's going to be it'll contain kind of the basics to get your business using very simple tools, your business ideas like minimum viable projects quickly out on the internet where you can, do REST API calls, get Stripe payments, show maps, dynamic maps, all sorts of, really powerful stuff. Very easy in a matter of hours, not days or weeks. Quickly get them out and see if, there's interest. And if there's no interest, you turn it down. Set something else, right? We're talking about $5 a month on DigitalOcean, so super cheap to run, and it's a great way of seeing if a side hustle or your side project is generating some interest, and if not, you can let it run for a few months, and if there's just nothing there, pull the plug. It's that easy. Again, so thanks for watching. Please give the video a thumbs up. I appreciate it. There's a question. Hey, let me just quickly see here, Kelly. So Kelly's asking here, what do you do if you have 400,000 data points in a CSV file, like more than 500 megabytes CSV file? Actually, I've deployed a Python app using Desk in free Heroku plan. Most of the same app is crashing due to memory error. So that's a really good question, right? I have faced similar situations. Yeah, I would say one thing you could do, right? If you want to go, obviously you could just get a bigger instance, a larger instance, and and so you could handle that large of a data size. The other thing I have been able to do is I have pickled my data, so I just make sure that I have the minimum amount of data I need. So let's say you have 500 megabytes of data in a CSV. Is this multi-columns, right? Do you really need every column? Could you reduce it, just a handful of column and then pickle it so you don't have to, upload and load the entire CSV in memory and do some feature engineering or whatever you're doing, some data transformation. So if you could do that offline and then pickle it and just put the minimum that you need up in the cloud, that'd be one way. The other way, there are different ways of reading a CSV file, right? You can read it by chunks. Using file reads, and there are plenty of ways you can look on Stack Overflow to do that. If you could, is it something like, for example, you're looking at between certain timestamps? If you are, then you don't need to load the entire thing in memory. You just need to load chunks of that data. I have not loaded enormous CSV files, but I've loaded a very large pre-trained models like XGBoost models that would make things crash. And on Python Anywhere, what it meant jacking up the size of your memory, jacking up the size of your hard drive in order to maintain this. So there's no magic, right? Either you clean up your data somewhere else and you just bring the minimum you need, you pickle it so it's easier to just kind of open without doing any pre-processing. You just kind of open it and it's ready to go. Or either if it's a memory issue, loading a memory, make sure you try to read it in chunks by kind of reading each line until you get the ones you want and just loading those in memory. So you're never bringing a lot in memory, or just forking out more money for a larger instance. And I have had plenty of the situations where, like I said, with XGBoost, I had to just fork out more money to get the right size. And once you get the right size, everything works fine. So that's part of planning these things. So there's more sophisticated cloud instances that kind of will adjust dynamically to the size of your data, to the memory used, to the traffic coming in, right? This we're looking at the cheapest instance on DigitalOcean, so you don't have the benefits, but it's up to you. If this crashes, then you have to kind of jack it up, go to the next size up. But great question. Thanks for watching. Thanks for asking a question. Again, if there's nothing else, I am going to stop the video here and start processing it, and then loading it up in one of these. There'll be a new one, and you'll have the cleaned up source code. My next live video, I want to do the proper way of running a Flask app. So what I showed you was kind of the development way of creating a Flask app. There is the proper way of doing it. It's actually not that hard either. And now that we have this quote running up, and we could very well just use this quote application, this REST API that gives quotes, but make it as a real Flask application, really running in the correct way in the cloud. So for example, here you have, if you go back to our console here, There. This is running, right? So if I kill this, the web app won't work anymore. So you have to basically have a process that makes it run in the background, where I'm losing everything here. Let's see. So you need to have it so it can run in the background, and you can close your terminal window and have your Flask app being served at all times, day and night. Anyways, thanks for watching. I don't think there's any more questions. Yeah, so Kelly's saying I'll try pickling or doing chunks. So that would be my advice. If you really don't want to go with a bigger size, then you'll have to you'll be limited to basically chunking it out, and that's never fun. It's a lot more processing and a lot more thinking in the way you're running your app. But good luck, and everybody, thanks for watching.